Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Author Sara Petersen is with us tonight to discuss her brand new book, Momfluenced, Inside the Maddening, Picture-Perfect World of Mommy Influencer Culture. And Sara will be in conversation with Cloe Axelson, who's the senior editor of WBUR's Opinion and Ideas page, Cognoscenti. So first, let me introduce Cloe. Cloe is the aforementioned senior editor of WBUR's opinion page. She previously worked for several nonprofit organizations, most recently as the director of communications for City Year and Match Education. She's also worked as a speechwriter at the Democratic National Committee, as a ghostwriter for a best-selling self-help author, and as a grassroots organizer on several political campaigns. Cloe has a MS in communication from Boston University, go Terriers, and a BA in political science from Tufts University. She lives with her husband and their 3 young daughters near Boston. And now let me introduce Sara. Sara Petersen is a writer based in New Hampshire. Her essays about feminism, domesticity, and motherhood have appeared in the New York Times, Harper's Bazaar, the Washington Post, In Style, Glamour, and many other places. She also writes a newsletter about the myth of the ideal mother called In Pursuit of Clean Countertops. And you can find Sara at sara-petersen.com and on Twitter and Instagram at @slouisepetersen. So everyone, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Cloe and Sara for joining us here tonight. And Cloe and Sara, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks for that introduction. Oh my.
I had no idea some of those parts of your bio. I had no idea.
Me either, really. It's been so long. Who could remember? Thanks for asking me to talk with you tonight, Sara. This is a real treat. We've done some work together over the years at WBUR, but we've never done anything like this exactly. So this is cool.
Yeah.
And I think you should start by reading some of your work. Like, read us a little bit.
All right, let's do it. Yeah, I like this passage because it sort of sets the stage for the book and just for how I'm thinking about this culture. So This is at the end of chapter 1. Many people have asked me why this book is focused on momfluencer culture and not influencer culture in general. And while my reasons are plentiful, the primary answer is that motherhood renders all mothers powerless to an extent, and momfluencer culture offers us power and control. We cannot control our bodies during pregnancy. We cannot control who our children will be. We cannot control who we will turn out to be as mothers. I harbored grand fantasies of being a serene earth goddess mother before having kids, the type who would think about traveling across time zones with her baby as an adventure rather than a logistical, sleep-deprived nightmare. We cannot control how motherhood will make us feel. I am continuously shaken by the nuance of feeling that motherhood ushers in. How I feel when my 6-year-old daughter tells me she doesn't want me to put her hair in a bun because it isn't pretty enough. How I feel when I don't get an invite to a mom hang. How I feel when my first baby tells me how big a whale's brain is. Motherhood can hurt us just as deeply as it can bring us joy. It is a role defined by vulnerability. And momfluencer culture is defined by trusting ourselves and others to respect that vulnerability. As we'll see throughout the book, this trust can be beautiful. And as we'll explore in chapter 6, this trust can also be dangerous. Power and trust can also always be used for good and evil. Ultimately, momfluencer culture allows us to control, at least to an extent, the mythology of our own motherhood. I don't have a ton of followers on Instagram, but every mom-centric photograph or caption I post is chosen to communicate something specific about my motherhood, about the type of mom I want others to see when they look at me. I want people to know I have a sense of humor and I'm not precious, so I post a photo of some dumb kid selfies with quippy, dry captions. Or maybe of a Snickers wrapper found nestled between cushions. I want people to know I'm thoughtful, that I value the beautiful liminal moments of motherhood. So I post a photo of sea-sprayed baby curls. I want people to appreciate my personal style, So I post a photo of the baby in a onesie dappled with indigo colored block prints of seaweed made, obviously, by a little known Brooklyn-based company. The photo is well lit, the composition is good. I want people to know that I'm smart and care about things bigger than myself, so I post about motherhood literature and maternal advocacy. I want people to know that I'm a cool mom, sometimes even a hot mom. So I post a photo of myself in a hand-knit ochre sweater, my love for ochre will never die, and jeans that make my app look perky. In the photo, I'm wearing makeup, but it's meant to look like I'm too cool to care about makeup or about how I look. I want people to know that I am loved, and therefore I must, to some extent, be a decent mom. So I post a photo of smiling kids snuggled in my lap. A couple thousand people digest my mythology, and who's to say it doesn't impact how they think of their own motherhood mythologies? I am a mother on Instagram, and what I choose to show influences those who watch. I am a momfluencer. If you are a mother on Instagram, so are you.
When I read that, it just drew me into your book, like big
Aw.
time, because I feel like so many people, certainly I personally could completely relate to it. I also have 3 young kids and a dog, and I also feel very much that being a mother is totally a role defined by vulnerability.
Yep.
And I think that is not something that we talk about a lot as a society, but is 100% true.
Yep.
So I want to get into all that, but at first I wonder if you could give our audience live and to come just a definition of what it means to be a momfluencer. Like what is that?
Yes. So, as I read in the passage, I am thinking about like sort of the holistic definition of a momfluencer as really anyone that is performing her motherhood on social media.
Mm-hmm.
And I say performing not as a pejorative, but just as a fact. I really do believe that when we share on social media, even when we like show up, at a school event, like we are always performing various selves. And I just want to be clear that I don't think performance is like necessarily a negative. I think it's just how people move through the world.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're deciding what to post on social media, like we're going through all these little filters in our head, and of course on the app, but like we're subconsciously and consciously thinking about what we want to communicate and why through what we choose to share,
Mm-hmm.
which is why I just don't think authenticity is such a big buzzword in terms of how we share on social media. I just don't think that's something achievable, because I think all social media involves some layer of performance. But anyway, that was a long tangent.
Fair. True. Totally true. Yep.
Yeah. But for like the simplest definition of a momfluencer is someone who has utilized her maternal identity to make money in some fashion on social media.
Mm-hmm.
So she can make money by partnering with a brand and sharing sponsored content. That can be a reel, which is essentially an advertisement, talking about Heinz ketchup and why she loves it, and her kids eating hamburgers and loving the Heinz ketchup. Or it can be like 2 posts where she just hashtags the brand, and you can click through, and then she gets a percentage of how many people click through and ultimately buy the product. So those are affiliate links. So those are the 2 main monetization models. But yeah, so that's what a momfluencer is.
When I first thought about momfluencers, I wasn't familiar actually with the term momfluencer until I came across your work. And then I was like, what is this? Is this like people who are in like white linen with like white countertops and like everything?
Often, yes.
Yes, often. And I like, there's definitely some people in my Instagram feed. And like, I for sure followed some people that you wrote about in the book because like, I just couldn't resist it. I fell down the ballerina farm hole earlier this week. I'm sort of embarrassed to say.
Wait, you had not followed her beforehand?
No.
Whoa, that's shocking.
I know, it is shocking. But now I'm shocked that she's like making cheese out of goat milk and like just swinging it. She makes giant things of sourdough bread. It's a lot to take in among like 7 children on the farm. But anyway, I think my point asking this is that I think it's awfully easy to be very snarky about this topic and
Yep.
to be sort of dismissive of these women and their power. And I think what's so inviting about your book and even just the passage that you just read is that you seem very driven by your own curiosity, by like you're super curious about this, and you've thought about it in a way that is sort of backed by science and social forces. And I wonder if you could tell us like how you got into it. Like, what's your own Momfluencer origin story? Where did this curiosity come from?
Yeah. I mean, I delve quite deeply into this in the book. But yeah, I think curiosity is the perfect word. I don't think I ever really looked at any of this stuff with like through the lens of, these people are trying to scam us. These people are trying to, like, this is a hoax. Like, they are faking it. They're not real. Like, because I basically, okay, let me fast forward, rewind. The first Momfluencers I discovered were in the mommy blogger era. So that was when I didn't even get my like first iPhone until like 2012. And I didn't like start Instagram until like 2014 or something.
A holdout.
I know, true. But I discovered Naomi Davis, who had a blog called Love Taza. And at the time I had a newborn and a toddler and had already experienced, I had postpartum depression with my first kid. The identity shift of motherhood, I was still grappling with. I was still very much trying to figure out like who I wanted to be as a mother, not even in terms of like parenting strategies or philosophies, but like, who am I? Like, who am I? What is this work I do? How is it seen in the world? How do I see myself in the world? And yeah, I discovered Naomi Davis. She had a aesthetically beautiful blog. She had at the time 3 kids in the Upper West Side of New York City, bright colors, like freckles, choppy bangs, just like tons of joy, fun, and adventure. And joy, fun, and adventure sort of tapped into some of my maternal insecurities. I went into motherhood wanting myself to be that type of mother. And I don't know, I would not describe myself in those terms. Like, I live and die by schedules. I get stressed out if we're late for, bedtime. It's, yeah, like Jennifer Senior's book, All Joy and No Fun.
All joy, no. Yeah.
Yes. Like, I've always just really related to that. But yeah, so I found her and I very much was just like, how is she, how? Like, I was
like this.
It's just how? And like, on the one hand, I was like thoroughly jaded as a mom of 2 little kids. And I knew motherhood was labor, like large part labor. But I also still wanted that fulfillment that I think our culture sells many of us in our even girlhood. And yeah, I look to her and others as sort of blueprints for how I might embody motherhood in a way that I perceive to be more fulfilling.
Did it work?
I mean, oh God. I mean, I bought a lot of stuff. I bought stuff. My consumer habits certainly were impacted. I would read like 10 things you need to bring on the airplane with your 2 under 2 and feel like, okay, this is going to like somehow like impact the core of myself. And, I don't think I was consciously thinking that, but I think many of us are so thirsty for any guides about, again, not like, how to sleep train or whatever, but just how to be a mother in this world that is so not friendly to mothers. And I'm talking specifically about, the US and our horrifying dearth of systemic support. But yeah. So I think that's where it all stemmed from.
Okay, that's coming. And I don't think that there's any bag of anything that can help a plane ride with 2 kids under 2 be better. Just speaking from experience, I have twins and I had to fly back and forth to Seattle all the time. There's no way to make it easier. It's just going to be terrible every
It's
single
just going to suck. Yeah.
It's just going to be awful.
Yeah.
But speaking of buying things, so I've heard you say, I'm going to read this, that the whole concept of a mother being self-sustaining is necessary to uphold capitalism. And someone pointed out to me the corollary to this really is that moms don't get paid to do domestic tasks, right? We're just sort of doing them, but momfluencers do either get paid to pretend them to do them or to actually do them. And that's like a very key theme that runs through your entire book. And I wonder if you could talk about that, like the tie to capitalism.
Yeah. I always cite Angela Garbus's incredible book, Essential Labor. She really digs into, not only unpaid labor, but invisible labor, and just like this root truth that I think we're almost deliberately taught to like stay away from. But care work is the work that makes all life possible. We would have nobody, running hedge funds if they had not been cared for and raised as humans. Like, care work is the most indispensable labor humans can do. And it's culturally disrespected and it's unpaid. And that is a huge, I think, psychic and mental disconnect when you're living in a society that equates value with money. We are taught to respect those who make the most money, regardless of how they make the money and what they're doing to make the money. We're not taught to respect people whose work makes all life possible. And that's not just mothers, of course. That's teachers, that's sanitation workers, that's house cleaners, that's childcare providers, that's people who work with elderly people. I mean, it's all of these jobs are underpaid and culturally disrespected, and they are the lifeblood just of not only culture, but just life. It's work that is absolutely necessary. And so I think if you are doing that type of labor every day for free, because you're supposed to love it and you're supposed to be fulfilled by it, and you're supposed to, really get by on just knowing that it's valuable, like that's just an impossible. I think that's just like psychically fraught position to be in, which is why I think so many mothers feel gaslit, like we're getting, breakfast in bed on Mother's Day, but we have no universal paid leave. Like it's absurd. It's really, really absurd.
Right. I saw something on TikTok the other day, I think, that was basically like, society says don't do it all, and the mom says, then who's going to do it?
Right.
Because someone's got to pack the lunches and get the kids to soccer practice and like sign up for camp and give a kid a shot of Tylenol. Like it's not going to happen on its own, for sure.
Totally. And this like cultural idea of the mother that has all the tools within her is also really critical for keeping her labor invisible and unpaid and undervalued. Because if a good mother can do it all, then she doesn't need access to affordable childcare. She doesn't need at least 3 months to heal from childbirth. Like, she doesn't need all of these things because she's a good mom and she can just do it, and she can do it all on her own. She doesn't need external support.
I wanna eventually turn to like what the concept of ideal motherhood is, like as you see it sort of writ large in American society. But I don't want to forget this point, which is how the pandemic sort of laid bare, very much so, all the work that mothers are doing and all the work that caregivers are doing, that our society and life really does rely on, and like the whole thing breaks down in absence of it.
Right.
And so I know, you correct me on the timeline, but my understanding is that you were writing the book during like the heart of the pandemic. Is that right? And I'm curious to know, like, you did you get the book deal prior to the pandemic beginning? And then, so there was already really something there that people were quite interested in. And then the pandemic happens and like the whole world sort of falls apart, as we all experienced, and you're like kindergartners going to kindergarten in your living room, which was horrific.
Yeah.
But like, can you talk about how the pandemic ultimately influenced the content of the book and how you went about writing it?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure I wrote the proposal during like the first wave, and then I started writing the book like during the second wave. My kids were definitely at home during the writing of the proposal and during some of the writing of the book.
Okay. Who can even remember, honestly?
Oh God. But yeah, like I conceptualized of the book before the pandemic, but was definitely writing it like during. And I remember writing like a paragraph or two directly about like, you know, being completely screwed as, you know, mothers in this country, like when the pandemic shut everything down in the proposal. But yeah, I mean, I think the more privilege we have, I think more shocked we were when our lives ground to a halt during the pandemic. I think, you know, the people with more layers of marginalization had always known that this system was completely inequitable and unsustainable. And I think it really, what it did was show all of us that it was inequitable and unsustainable because, you know, for the most privileged of us, we had people helping us with house cleaning. We had people helping us with childcare. We had people teaching our children. We had all, you know, we were not mothering alone by any stretch of the imagination. And when, you know, we were completely locked down, people could not enter our home, we could not enter other people's homes. That's when it was like, oh, now I'm doing all of the mothering. Whereas before, I had like a constellation of people helping me with this, largely due to privilege. And so I do think that was a real reckoning for folks. It certainly was for me. I remember distinctly just feeling lost without my kids' teachers. Like, you know, not even, you know, of course, we were all stressed about like academic stuff, but like mostly just because I had come to rely on these people, you know, how's so-and-so doing with friends? How's so-and-so doing with transitions? Like, we don't mother alone. And, you know, I think, you know, the nuclear family, the cult of the nuclear family pushes a narrative like we should be mothering alone and we should be completely siloed in our little, you know, 2-parent households with 2.5 kids and a white picket fence. But like, that's bad. That's bad. And I think most of us really sat with that during lockdown. Like, I don't think anybody is happy not mothering, you know, mothering without community. Like, I think it just became clear that for most of human history, we have mothered alongside community and in community. And yeah, that was a big, I think, big eye-opening moment for so many of us.
And did that change how you wrote the book? Did it influence the content of the book at all?
So it did in like some aspects. There's one Momfluencer I do like a case study of in the book, and I would characterize her as a trad mom. And that's short for just traditional. But yeah, a trad mom or trad wife is someone who adheres to traditional gender roles. So, you know, the man, it'll be a heterosexual marriage. The man will be working outside the home. The woman will be working inside the home. But yeah, one of them I write about in the book, and I was following during lockdown, prior to vaccines. And just her complete lack of consideration of the pandemic just became like sort of impossible for me. Yeah. Like, just, still romping through the wildflower fields, still, twirling around in aprons, still waxing poetic about like, the miracle and joy of home and hearth and happy. It's like, and people were dying. So many people were dying and suffering. And those disconnects I do trace throughout the book. And I think those disconnects between the idealized imagery of motherhood and the verb mothering, the labor of mothering, and how none of us are doing it alone. We're all doing it in certain contexts, and our mothering experiences are all impacted by privilege or lack of privilege. And yeah, that was definitely a reoccurring theme in the book, looking at this idealization, which was often static and imagistic, and comparing that to just individual lived experiences.
Mm-hmm. How would you say that the idealized version of motherhood that often appears through various Momfluencer accounts is influenced by race and class? Like, how do those things intersect?
Yeah, race, I mean, whiteness and motherhood are, have been bedfellows for hundreds of years in our country specifically. I mean, slavery, like slavery. White upper class mothers were put on pedestals as sort of the moral centers of the home during the cult of domesticity in the late 19th century. And Black enslaved mothers were not viewed as mothers, like at all. Like, they were not viewed as humans. They were not viewed as mothers. They were often raising white people's children, and their children were being, violently ripped from them. So from the very beginning of our, national history, motherhood has been steeped in whiteness, and only specific mothers have been valued for their maternal morality, their supposed innate maternal morality, while others have been explicitly excluded. Working class mothers, poor mothers, working outside the home was seen as not feminine and unseemly. So they were excluded from the, cult of true womanhood. Yeah, and so many of the visuals of, ideal motherhood still that we see on Instagram and other social media, platforms and other forms of media is still very much rooted in that domestic ideal. A hyper femme, white, thin, cishet woman who's married, often several children. And it's all very like mother and child. It's very like Madonna archetypes.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in a domestic setting most of the time. Like, we are culturally used to equating good motherhood with a certain mother in a certain setting. And yeah, and it's really baked into everything. Not just race is just looming over all constructions of ideal motherhood, but it also certainly impacts, gender identity and sexuality and, body size. Fat mothers are, subject to medical fat phobia. They are not able to access healthcare often. I spoke to several moms who identify as fat or, have reclaimed the word fat, who couldn't get fertility treatments. They would go in, they had been, trying to have a baby for a year, and the doctor would not even test them and would just say, you need to lose weight before you come back in. So it's like, it's baked into so many systemic parts of our world. And I think, it's easy to absorb these images, these like Johnson & Johnson's commercials, and think just, oh, that's a nice mother. That's like how motherhood is supposed to be. But like, it's always the same mother. It's always the same mother. And the sameness of that has a numbing and erasing effect, I think.
Mm-hmm. Did you, before you started researching this book, did you have an inkling of that, or are these sort of things that you learned along the way?
I mean, honestly, because of my own significant layers of privilege, I think I mostly went into this trying to trace my own, like, very personal preoccupation with this stuff. Like, this is making me feel bad. Like, I want to know why. And yeah, it was definitely a process of reading this book and then reading that book and then reading this article. And, at a certain point, it was just like, holy shit, like the whole book should just be called like, nice white mommies or whatever, because that really is the undercurrent of it all. Yeah. So yeah, it was 100% not what I was thinking about. I was thinking about it, but I was naively not understanding that it was the entire book, not just like, part of the book. Like, it is the whole book.
Yeah, and the information you found really shaped your understanding of what
Totally.
you thought you knew, sort of, I guess.
Yes, totally.
I wanted to switch gears ever so slightly, and say, so I listened to a New York Times daily episode earlier this week about artificial intelligence, and I'm like not interested in artificial intelligence at all.
Same.
I'm just like, I'm like hard pass. But
Same.
I work in media, and I should have some
Right.
ability to talk about these things. So I listened to this episode. It drew me in, and it was terrifying. And what it was like, ultimately where it landed is that AI is eventually could be a massive purveyor of disinformation.
Yeah.
Which I think is, one of the biggest threats that we face presently as in our American democracy, and sort of writ large across the world. And I wonder, not knowing what's true or what's false anymore is a very big problem.
Right.
And so I wonder if you see a relationship between the momfluencer culture and disinformation, whether it's regarding, like, the outcome of a particular election,
Right.
or vaccine efficacy, or what have you.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, there's a really troubling undercurrent of momfluencer culture, like QAnon moms, anti-vax, anti-mask moms, anti-feminism, pro-femininity moms. And yeah, some of them have hundreds of thousands of followers. Some of them are selling like online classes or like guidebooks about their particular ideologies. Some of them are like vehemently anti-trans. And 100% are spreading disinformation and harmful harmful debunked studies.
Mm-hmm.
And they do tend to, be majority white moms. And there is like a awful history of white mothers being weaponized to promote certain ideologies and social movements. Nazi mothers were given medals for how many children they had in Nazi Germany. White mothers have, been historically utilized by hate groups and alt-right groups to not only bear as many white children as possible, but to spread that information, not only, with their children, but with their communities. And it is a way for largely disenfranchised women and mothers to gain a false sense of empowerment. Like, here I am, maybe I have 6 kids at home. Again, I'm not paid for my work. I'm not culturally respected for my work, But this group, QAnon or whatever, Proud Boys, whatever it is telling me that like, oh, my work is valuable and I can be an authority in something and people will listen to me and see me as a thinker and see me as a maverick and see me as, capable of doing my own research. And I really do think that I have no way to prove this, but I think if motherhood was not viewed as just this thing that you should do, if you're a good person, good mother, and as a thing that you should be happy to do for free and you should be happy to do without any sort of like, cultural validation, I don't think people would be so apt to jump on board with stuff like this. I think it's very human to want meaning and to want to feel like your work matters in whatever aspect. And yeah, I just really wonder how prevalent this stuff would be if mothers occupied a different position in society.
Do you think it's possible to be momfluenced if you're not on social media? Is that like the right verb to be momfluent? Sorry.
I don't know. Yeah, like of course, like we can be influenced as mothers by other mothers in real life.
Right.
But it's a different thing when you're making choices. Like oh my God, did you hear that? Did you?
Oh.
I have one of those, the vacuum robot things.
Oh, the Roomba?
Yeah, it's like an off-brand one, but it just beeped in the corner and it scared me.
Real life. It's real life.
I totally lost. What was the thread?
Oh, we were talking. I asked you if it was possible to be momfluent.
Oh yeah,
if you were not on social media.
I think the difference is that, like, okay, if my friend who I've known for 8 years is recommending, I don't know, like a music enrichment class or whatever, I know her context. I know her sense of humor. Like, I know that she's going to know me. Like, that's a huge part. I know she knows me. And so it's like, creating that recommendation based on not only her own preferences, but the fact that she knows me. Whereas if I'm, buying something or making a life choice based on a parasocial relationship, that's totally different because it's a one-sided relationship. I might know a million things about this person's life that she has chosen to share, and thus feel as though she occupies a similar role, that my IRL friends do, but she doesn't know me. And so, yeah, I do think it's a different thing.
Okay, I'm just looking at a message from Robert here, and we're just going to be able to keep talking a little bit more, which is good because I have more questions for you. You dedicated your book to your mom, I noticed, and maybe this is like too personal a question to tackle on our webinar this evening, but I'm sort of curious to know what kind of version of motherhood your mom showed you, and how because moms influence us for sure, and how we choose to parent, either we want to do the same thing or just the exact opposite, but either way, and that caught my eye. I'm curious.
Yeah. My mom, her work was rooted in the home. She had a few jobs outside the home here and there, but never had like a career, so to speak, outside of domestic labor and child rearing. And she very much made homemaking feel like a creative endeavor. I could, like, her passion for, creating a wreath out of bittersweet was like it felt so true to her, and it felt like she was doing something that filled her up. And it also happened to be something that like beautified the home. And so I think I grew up unthinkingly just assuming that I would follow in those footsteps, and that motherhood and domestic labor could be this, wholly fulfilling endeavor that utilized my creativity, my intelligence, and like helped me grow as a person. And again, I think this was all very, very subconscious. I was not actively like parsing through these thoughts as a kid or even as a young adult. But yeah, I also, most of my aunts also worked primarily in the home, and they were all strong, fiery, like self-assured women. So I think those role models just really made me view, doing the same thing as like like all of the women around me are doing this. They seem awesome. They seem like like cool individuals I would want to hang out with. Like, this is what I'm going to do. And then, when you become a mom yourself, you really like, if you grew up with a mother, I think it's impossible not to look at your own childhood through a different lens and look at your mother through a different lens. So many things sort of like clicked into place for me. Like in those early days where I was just floundering, and I think, I hope I put it more succinctly in the book, but like there's a lot of rage that I certainly deal with as a mother, and I can sort of connect that back to my mother and totally understand where it's coming from, where it was coming from. Whereas like as a kid, I didn't. But again, I think it comes back to this like role being too big for anyone to fully embody and feel free within.
Yeah. I mean, I think something I've seen you write and say many times before is the notion that you can love being a mom and sort of really sometimes hate the act of mothering, which I think is probably the feeling a lot of people have, but are kind of afraid to say out loud.
Right.
And I wonder if one of your hopes for this book is maybe that people are more free to like say the truth, and because your work is part of a canon of many books of books like Angela Garbus, who we were with, like just a few weeks ago, or Kate Bear, or Chelsea Todboy, or so many people who are doing really important work in this area and making sort of explaining like actually there's a whole lot more to this mothering thing than we've ever gotten credit for.
Totally.
So I wonder, like, where do you see your book fitting in among those authors and authors like them?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I still can't believe I'm, like in conversation with these incredible minds that I've looked up to for so many years. But yeah, I just think it's like the static ideal is serving no one. And I like motherhood is often treated as like a niche topic in publishing and elsewhere, which is just patently absurd. I mean, there is nothing more like gripping, life-changing, and blood and guts than motherhood. I mean, think of all the books we have of like angsty 20-something-year-old white dudes like wandering cities and like, having deep thoughts and writing poetry. Like, what? Like, that's not like an exciting tale. Like, but like sometimes creating within your own body humans, and then like raising these beings to be the next people in like it's just the most human thing there is. So yeah, I don't know. I just think like I feel like sometimes there will be these conversations like, oh, do we really need another mom book? And it's like, yes, we need a million more, because like we're all different and we all have different stories. And like the more these individual stories are told, I think the less power this like monolithic, or not just this one static ideal has over all of our lives and our cultural imagination.
Mm-hmm. We've gotten a little, we're on a path. We're like, we've like veered away a little bit from the central tenets of the book, which I think is cool because I agree with you. You know, being a mother is not a monolith. But I do wonder what good can come, like what good is coming of momfluencer culture? It's not all bad, certainly.
Oh, totally, totally.
Right. Like, so talk about that.
Yeah. I've got a chapter in the book about mothers who are artists, who are activists, who are advocates, who are, writers, who are thought leaders. And yeah, they are using their large platforms on social media to really shake up this notion that there's just one way to be a mother. And I have learned a lot from these mothers and these women. They create integral, like really vibrant communities where otherwise community might be really hard to find, whether because of geographic reasons or, other access issues. They educate I mean, I feel like we only have 10 minutes, so I don't want to but yeah. But yeah, there are so many different kinds of momfluencers that will make you feel less alone, that will provide like really life-giving information, whose work is not at all hinged on upholding an ideal.
That's hopeful.
Yeah.
It's not all bad. If you could, at the Cognoscenti event I was like referenced a couple minutes ago, you said basically that in your utopia, motherhood on social media would look like motherhood in real life. And so I wonder, like, paint us a picture of that. Like, what does that actually mean to you?
I mean, it wouldn't look like anything because like it just sounds so like ridiculous, but like we're all different. Like it's motherhood is this bizarre identity marker in terms of painting all people who are raising children who are women with like the same brush. It's not the same for fatherhood, which I think is like a huge tell and points to the gendered way we view caregiving and parenthood. But yeah, in an ideal world, we wouldn't all be able to close our eyes and envision like the ideal image of a mother that we were taught to aspire to and adhere to. And, yeah, I just think motherhood would feel less weighty and more attention would be given to the labor of mothering and the various individuals doing that labor.
What areas well, I'm curious to know like what you've been thinking about lately. Not necessarily, I don't want to ask you like what's your next book. I will not ask that question, but I am curious, like what have you been thinking about? Like you've clearly been talking about the momfluencer culture and like all the research that you've done for this book. And I wonder like what's that brought up for you? What else are you thinking about lately?
Yeah, I'm obsessed with ads. I'm
okay.
so obsessed with ads. And I talk about this a little in the book. There's a chapter on like mid-century advertising to moms, Betty Crocker and all that. But yeah, I am really fascinated with how female identity is conceptualized, marketed, and sold to us through products, through media, through consumer culture. I've been like re-examining my own like childhood and thinking about that a lot, like American Girl dolls, Bath and Body Works, grass perfume from the Gap, like the J. Crew sale catalog. Like there are all these little touch points that really fundamentally impacted my identity.
Mm.
And yeah, I think the connection between identity and consumer culture is just really interesting. So
How is your research influencing how you're parenting your own children? Do you have
no.
do you have any daughter? Do you have any girls?
Oh, do you mean in terms of like social media or?
I mean, in terms of like you sort of have this very deep understanding of how we're influenced by like the world that's out there,
Yeah,
and that some of it isn't, a lot of it isn't real,
totally.
and it's performative. And like, how do you think that that's influencing your own interactions with your kids?
I mean, I try to talk about it and just call things what they are. But yeah, like it's, I mean, I think I was listening to one of Michael Hobbs's podcasts. I think it might have been If Books Could Kill, but he just said like he thinks like marketing towards children should be illegal. And I was like, yeah, like they're little like sponge brains. Like, of course we equate who we are with the stuff we buy. We are taught to do that from like infancy. And yeah, like we can tell our kids like this is a system, these things were invented to make you buy things, but like they're in thrall of it just like we were. So it's frustrating for sure.
It sounds like I'm going to get to ask one last question. So I will ask what I ask when I ever do an interview, which is what did you hope to talk about that I just completely missed? That I like totally dropped the ball on? Like what were you like, how did you not ask me about XYZ?
Oh my God. Well, you did not drop the ball on anything. I guess I would say like this book is fun. Like you mentioned earlier, like a lot of times this content can be like snarkily covered and dismissively covered. And I really do my best not to do that, but it is a fun book. Like, sure, we dive into some dark, depressing shit, like for sure. But I would say it's also fun. And there's so many incredible voices in this book that are not mine. That was one of the joys of writing this book, was getting to talk to so many different people about their experiences. I think it's really fascinating to learn from, momfluencers who have monetized their accounts and this is their job. I think the job of influencing is really worth unpacking. And I do that a lot in the book as well. Yeah.
It is a really fun read. It feels like you're reading a book. You have a wonderful voice, and it feels like you're sitting talking with a friend, who like a super smart, very well researched friend, but a really fun one too.
Oh, thanks.
And there's Robert.
So I'm gonna pop back in, and folks, we're gonna start to wind it down. I wanted to give Sara and Cloe one last opportunity in case they wanted to leave us with any last words. So Sara or Cloe, is there anything you'd like to say to the audience?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for having us, and thanks for everyone who is here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. And I'll just mention this, otherwise my colleagues will be mad at me, but you can follow Cognoscenti on Instagram at CogWBUR, and just check out WBUR.org is where you can find us.
I love WBUR. So Cloe and Sara, wonderful job, folks. Let's give Sara and Cloe a big virtual round of applause as the only male librarian in Tewksbury. And I'm not sure how I wound up with this assignment, but I learned quite a bit. I really enjoyed this, so thank you both so much. So those who are watching live, look for an email from me tomorrow with the recording, the feedback survey, with information on how you can purchase a copy of Sara's book through Wellesley Books, and also information about some other upcoming virtual and in-person author visits that might be of interest. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night. Thanks again. Thank you, Cloe. Thank you, Sara.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.